We now move on to the third part of our afternoon's proceedings, which is entitled The Future of Online Video. And we're going to take a look at the challenges on the horizon facing video online owners and broadcasters, their counterparts, and talk to those who really understand better than anyone else in the world about these disrupted borders and the challenges that they face. I'd like to start by welcoming Ashley Highfield onto the stage. Please give him a warm welcome. Now, Ashley, you are the newly appointed CEO of Kangaroo, I believe.
That's right.
Which is a joint, for those that don't know, is a joint venture between BBC Worldwide, ITV and Channel 4, and Video Online. But I think you're going to start by showing us a film about a previous venture that you were involved in the founding of, which is iPlayer. And you can have it now.
With BBC iPlayer, you can catch up with TV and radio programmes from the past 7 days.
What's that?
Watch or listen online or download them to your computer.
We're accelerating into the future. We're going to the end of the universe.
And it's all for free.
One extra breakfast service.
BBC iPlayer, making the unmissable unmissable.
Well, that was the iPlayer.
Yeah.
Talk us through some of the things that you're doing now. I mean, I think you have a PowerPoint or slide demonstration to show us some of the things that you're involved with.
Yes, I thought I'd uniquely embrace the high technology of a two-button control. So, I just wanted to share a few facts due to the way the BBC is funded. I can share some of our commercially sensitive information with you. So, I just wanted to take you through where we've been since we launched at Christmas. And what we're seeing now in April was around about 700,000 programs being streamed or downloaded every day. The rate of increase looks like it's pretty linear, like a train at the moment. It may well tail off, it may not. I mean, we are in a voyage into the unknown. On Sunday, we did our best day of just 900,000 programs on the day. So I think we'll be in the next couple of weeks through the million programs a day level. And in total, since the marketing campaign hit, about 75 million programs from the BBC have been streamed or downloaded. What's interesting and kind of important for us is that this has not impacted television viewing. In fact, year on year for that same period, viewing to BBC television has actually increased. We're seeing a pretty interesting demographic split as well. Younger than BBC television, but older than our typical internet viewing. And that's pretty good news for us. We are bringing in a new younger audience to the BBC. Again, we don't really know how this is going to settle out. But in terms of platform, this has been really important for us. We soft launched last summer and immediately got into well, a shitstorm on the internet for not having launched with an Apple version. We learnt, and by the time we hit the marketing campaign at Christmas, we made sure that there was a streaming version for the Mac, and we're working on a download service for the Mac as well. Interestingly, in the UK, the Mac accounts for about 5% of sales, but as you can see here, it's accounting for 10% of consumption. And given it appears practically every journalist in Britain has a Mac, it accounts for something like 50% of the PR feedback. And we've tried now very hard to get ahead of expectation of our audience. And so earlier this year, we put the service out onto the iPhone and the iTouch. And then literally in the last few weeks, we put the service onto the Nintendo Wii. Now, it's still quite a complicated user experience on the Wii. But for us, that was pretty important to have all of our television programs being available to a device that was connected to your television set. Yeah. And then very recently, we launched on Virgin Cable. So we've now got two platforms where you can start to consume completely on demand BBC programs on your TV. And what this is showing us is quite an interesting pattern of consumption. Now, the vertical axis has been flattened out, whilst it might look like iPlayer's getting the same kind of viewing as television, it is not. So just take from this the pattern of consumption during the day. And what we're seeing for the grey blob at the bottom is television consumption. Typical internet consumption in the UK is the blue line, and iPlayer is somewhere in between. Now, this is really good news for us as a broadcaster. It's bringing in new audience during the day, and it's also giving us extended peak at night. Now, this is too early for us to know exactly why this is happening, but anecdotally, it appears that after about 10 o'clock, when people have watched the programs they wanted to watch, or Sky Plus, the ones they were going to watch, they then are starting to open up the laptop or go into the den or start to actually watch stuff on demand. And this is a pretty recent but pretty solid trend that we're seeing. And so again, we don't think this is taking share away from television. If anything, we think it's taking share away from, well, the sleep fairy, I guess. This slide kind of shows how much viewing in comparison to television viewing. So our biggest program, EastEnders, on any given night, it's getting 8, 9, 10 million audience. The 18.9 is anyone who touches the program, three-minute reach. And so whilst the iPlayer numbers, 457,000, are pretty good, they're still a very small percentage, 2, 3% of the television audience. Take something like Gavin and Stacey, which is a BBC Three, so one of our smaller networks programs, but very popular for that channel. And suddenly you're seeing that iPlayer is actually adding something like 7% additional audience to Gavin and Stacey. And then take it to something like MI High, which is a program that airs on our children's channel. So clearly a much younger demographic, about 12 years old. And suddenly we're seeing maybe a pattern for the future where the iPlayer is adding 20% plus audience to the television. The back button works, good. And then finally, I think no presentation would be complete without a long tail slide.
You have to have a long tail slide. Couldn't let you go without it.
And what we're seeing here is that the top hits, The Apprentice, Doctor Who, are taking a good share. The top 3 programs can take 20% share of iPlayer. But what we are also seeing is that outside the top 10 programs on iPlayer, outside that top 10 is accounting for 50% of all share of consumption on iPlayer. And indeed, outside the top 50, we're still seeing about 20% share comes from outside the top 50. So we are seeing this kind of polarization, maybe, of the big hits really breaking through an iPlayer, and then a very, very long tail. Almost every program, and we've got something like 450 hours a week of programming, everything gets touched on iPlayer at least a few times.
Is there a logic with iPlayer that obviously what a lot of people want to watch is precisely the kind of things that they wouldn't be staying in to watch? You know, they hear a week later that something obscure on BBC 4, which actually 2 years down the line will be a hit sitcom, is worth watching. And can iPlayer meet that demand, which is for the slightly off-piece stuff?
Yeah, the best example of that was a one-off program, Louis Theroux, on living in an American prison for a few days. And that got a reasonably good audience on air, but it then got that playground effect or the water cooler effect and did great numbers. In February, it was our best performing program. So there is definitely that effect where this is a catch-up service. But interestingly, increasingly, we're seeing people are coming to iPlayer. The audience numbers are just going steadily up. And if there isn't a kind of a really big rating program on that night, they're watching something else instead. So we're actually building a loyal audience to iPlayer, not just coming in for a particular program.
Do you feel yourself in this venture in competition with online video hubs like YouTube? I mean, is it a contest or are they complementary?
No, I think they're really complementary.
Yeah. But tell us what you really think.
No, we spent a long time coming to a deal with YouTube, and I think it's been a really important deal for us where we've put a couple of channels up on YouTube and a lot of our short form content, and this is to the kind of short form versus long form. We try and make really entertaining clips, not just promotional material, but handcrafted short-form content on YouTube. One, to be entertaining on YouTube, but two, to hopefully introduce content to an audience that may not come to the BBC, and hopefully bring them across to the long form. The average duration of consumption on an iPlayer is 22 minutes. People are watching full-length programs, full screen, and getting, you know, the really immersive experience. So I think it's quite different and therefore complementary.
And obviously one of your challenges in your various roles at the BBC and now looking forward to Kangaroo has been to try and take the most traditional entrenched broadcasting organisation in the world that, you know, flows from Reithian values, and to try and pitch it into the world of YouTube and Google. I mean, that must be a cultural challenge of some scale.
No, I don't think it is actually, and I don't see the BBC like that, and I think, you know, it would be disingenuous of me to sort of pretend that I'm some kind of evangelist. I think the BBC actually is an immensely creative, forward-looking company. You know, it started broadcasting television after all, and it was the first broadcast colour in '67, and so on. I think it invented NICAM stereo. I think the thing about the BBC actually is it sees where the trends are coming, and has the, I suppose, the confidence, or maybe it's just the funding mechanism to take the long-term view, if you wanted to be cynical. But I think actually the BBC has always been able to keep up with the pace of change.
Okay, well, everyone, thank you to Ashley. We'll see him in a second. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd now like to welcome Christian Vollman on stage. Christian. Now, Christian, until very recently, was the MD of Magic Internet, and also, intriguingly, the founder of My Video, the largest online site in Germany. Christian, you've got a unique story to tell, in that you're someone who founded a very successful online video site, which was then purchased by a traditional broadcaster, ProSieben. What was that like?
Right. You just said we're the biggest online site in Germany. That would be very nice, actually. Being the biggest online video site, we were purchased by ProSieben Sat.1, which is one of the two big German television networks. And what they were really looking for was the creativity within the community, and, you know, to capture those audiences they were losing in their traditional programming. And they made a bold move by doing that. In Germany, it's a very competitive market because you have YouTube, which is the global brand, really, and then you have their competitor, RTL, also operating an online video site. And then there was My Video. And what they've done was really to, you know, scout for new talent on My Video, bring it onto the traditional television program, make a show out of it, and experiment in lots of ways to really find new ways how to get engage with their audience, the young audience.
Because when something that's entrepreneurial and exciting and dynamic and new is taken over by something more established, I mean, the classic example in movies was when Miramax was bought by Disney, and the Weinstein brothers were terrified. When that happened, were you scared that something might be lost in the process?
No, I was never scared at any point, because as Chad already said, the creativity is really within the community, right? The community makes all the content. We saw that yesterday evening with the YouTube show. We're seeing it here with the users. We have very similar experiences. On My Video, we have a 13-year-old girl called Mina who was discovered by the community, posting music videos, singing, doing actually their own songs, not only cover versions, but their own songs. She also went on to get a contract with a music label and has now a big following, like many followers in Germany. And so I was never afraid that would be lost, because this is really what user-generated content is about, tapping the creativity and the collective creativity of the users. And so this has not been interrupted. It's going on as it is. In fact, it has been enhanced because users are thrilled by the opportunity to upload their videos on my video, but also the opportunity to get onto television, which is still a big thing in Germany.
Right, because I mean, what you're presenting runs counter to the orthodox view, which is that somehow the dynamism of an entrepreneurial idea is threatened when it is absorbed into a much bigger traditional organization. What you're saying was that in some respects, it was a liberation for my video.
Well, it helped my video a lot. And I also have to say that ProSieben has been very sensitive not to intervene too much into the culture of my video as a company, right? They left us all the freedom, and they helped us in many ways. And the show, my video show on Sat.1, one of the big channels, has been a very good opportunity of experimenting. You know, how can you combine the two media, the two formats, and also what they've done is bring a lot of their professional content onto my video. For example, Germany's Next Top Model by Heidi Klum is really a very big type of event casting show. They're looking for the next top models. And it's hugely popular in Germany, not only because of Heidi Klum, but also because of her. And what ProSieben has done is take a lot of previously unseen material, backstage material, spoof, like things that went wrong behind the scenes, and best of collections, and put it onto a My Video channel. And that has worked really well, and it has actually increased the audience in television for them.
So do you think there is actually more scope in future years for collaboration between the emergent online video hubs, such as the one you founded, and traditional broadcasting organizations?
Yeah, definitely.
And what form might that take?
I think the traditional television broadcasters have to be more open and more risk-taking and more willing to experiment with new formats. I imagine a show that is purely user-generated in television, where even the moderator, like you, would be casted and chosen and elected by the community, and you would, have the community contribute to the content, contribute to the format of the show. So I envision a purely user-generated show on television. I think it would be hugely successful.
But is that not a big cultural shift for these quite hierarchical command and control organizations?
Yes, definitely. I mean, at the moment, it's not happening. We're not there. I think it would be a great thing to do, but traditional television is finding it hard to do that.
Is there a specifically German aspect to the online revolution? I mean, each nation produces its own twist on what is going on globally, and obviously, it is a global phenomenon. But how is it shaped out in Germany?
Well, I think you always have local content, and you have content that works globally, right? If I see a dog skateboarding on YouTube, this will obviously work globally. But if something, for example, that is typically German, I should say, is that, for example, in the car category, where it's all about cars and tuning, we were quite surprised that a lot of times we would see videos where you would see a car in neutral, you would see only the exhaustion pipe, and someone hits the gas pedal. And we were thinking, why do those videos get 100,000, 200,000 views? Because we couldn't think of anything that is funny or crazy about them.
Yeah.
Until a friend of mine told me that he likes my videos so much because he can actually listen to the exhaust pipes he wants to buy for his car. And then, I finally understood, okay, here's
niche marketing.
Here's a niche that really appreciates that, right?
No, sure. Now, you've done a lot of exciting projects in the past. You ran I Love, dating online. What are the lessons that you've imported from all the various things that you've done to the next project? Were there lessons from the dating agency that you could carry into online video?
Well, I think the broader lesson is really that starting a company and being an entrepreneur is really an attitude, and you have to work hard basically every day and come up with new ideas every day. The competition never sleeps, and that's really the one big takeaway, I think. Apart from that, I've really shifted from coming from iLove. It was all about online marketing and getting as many users and the critical mass of users so that enough girls could find enough boys and there would be enough matches and users would be happy, to my video where it was really all about, or now at least, or it's mainly about monetizing something that has a lot of traffic, but where you still have to find the right way and the perfect way to monetize it and to build a sustainable business out of it.
What do you think the revenue streams on online video will be 5–10 years hence?
Well, we've tried a lot selling content in the beginning, and I have to be honest with you, it simply doesn't work. That's the bad news, actually. The willingness to pay is close to zero, but then we just came to accept that and moved into the area of selling advertisement. And we've been, since we have had very limited funds, I would love to have the funds of Google available for my side as well. But we had to be much more aggressive in trying out new ways how to monetize the site. So we're doing pre-roll, post-roll, mid-roll, banners, search, you name it, we do it all. And
how quickly do you think the television advertising industry can be persuaded to shift more and more of its advertising over to online? I think it's a slow process, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's going to depend on when the industry finds the best way to monetize and finds a real business model, and which makes content owners, the video site, the users, and the advertising industry. You have to get them all on board and all feel comfortable with the model. And I think as soon as we found that, and I'm confident that it's going to happen, I think we're going to see a land rush.
And finally, what are you going to do next?
Well, I'm now taking a break, traveling the world, looking for a new idea, and going to present it next year at Zeitgeist, I guess.
Wonderful. Well, we wish you well. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to welcome on stage Antonio Campo Dall'Orto. Thank you. Antonio has a glittering resume, but he's presently at the Stellar Heights CEO of MTV South Europe. And can you start by telling us a bit about what MTV South Europe is actually doing at the moment?
Yeah, we are, first, to define the geography, we are covering Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, and Greece. And what we're trying to do as our overall MTV is trying to adapt, if you want, to a new world. Actually, we didn't start yesterday, in a sense that we started quite many years ago. And to be honest, and this 2 days for me has been a strong confirmation, being today inside the media environment is very exciting because in some way the distribution revolution is also letting us go to any kind of place. So if you look at what we have become, in some way we have done a process of passing from broadcasters, like we were till linear broadcasters till 10 years ago, to what we call internally post-broadcaster or hyper-broadcasters, in a sense that in the last 9 years we from one way have involved in the creative process more the young people, also if I think there is still more to do there, and also trying to apply the new rules about being anywhere and in any place that has helped us to, as I said, to adapt to the new world. But you were saying, oh, how are we doing today? I think that after this first part, I think we did, if you want, the easy part. In a sense that today, we don't say it loudly, but we are happy because we feel that we have done this process. Just to give you some numbers, we have also a video prepared, but I think it's better. I think yesterday they called us the lost generation, so I think that we all know what MTV looks like. Today, maybe not everyone is aware, but we have more than 150 channels, more than 300 digital services. 1/3 of them are on the mobile environment. We speak 33 different languages. What I mean is that this is the representation of what I call the upper broadcaster, in the sense that we did that. And we did it in a way that is also economically sound, because as we know, going into the world, the new world, the economics are, especially in this phase, quite a delicate point. And MTV International last year had its best year ever. Why? Because we were able to combine what were affiliate and ad sales classic revenues for us with a digital one, so that let's say that this change is letting us time not to substitute only, but to add first, and then probably in the future to substitute, because we know that the world is going to that direction. And we did it with one strong guideline, that is to keep strong the relationship with the viewer that now are also users and creators. And this was done on a principle that, for me, that I'm coming from a video content point of view, related to these 2 days, is something that is embracing also the personal experiences, in a sense that when I talk about relationship, we try to have it in a way that it involves digital, it involves television, it involves direct experiences. The day in which, in '99, we decided to go more into the digital world, started the process, we also decided to do a big investment in direct experiences, because we think that towards the viewers and the users, and towards the advertising community, to be able to have a wide approach has proved to be effective at the moment.
MTV was founded in 1981, which in the context of the sort of Google years makes it the granddad of the disco. How do you keep in touch with a generation that is moving faster, much faster than the MTV generation in its expectations?
No, you're right in a sense that look at here, I could have felt old, but then there was also BBC that sounded very still active and creative, and it's even older than us. So how can we do it? We do it because I liked a lot on the, I think it was Nikesh's first video presentation, that there was many phrases. One was saying, change is constant. And that's true. And it's true, especially if you have always worked, also if you're for 25 years, around young people, attitude, behavior, etc. Because at the end, we were used to adapt. Obviously, that doesn't mean that the revolution hasn't changed our world, in a sense that it's not a case that we call it digital revolutions, because what has been happening in the last years is not comparable to the changes we had before. But believe it or not, and this can sound either logics or strange to you, but the needs of young people hasn't changed much. What has changed is the way they express their needs and the way they fulfill their needs. But this is why I'm saying that we keep the bar towards the relationship. And so at the end, the changes that we have are more the adaptation to what the world is telling us in terms of distribution channel, in terms of business model, in terms of which kind of video can work and which kind of shows cannot work. And then consider that being based in so many countries, we are a kind of constant laboratory, because anytime we have an idea that works in South Korea, we transfer it in the rest of the world. Anytime we understand that something doesn't work in one place, and then in practical, what did we do? We had different phases in our adaptation to the new world. The first one was to become a kind of technology neutral. So that the first year we wanted to be in every platform without being stopped by distribution. Now we are working a lot on a concept of being device specific, because it's true that digital is digital, but at the end, a mobile phone has a logic that is different to a PC, it's different to television, and it's different to a live concert. So what we want to do is to adapt ourselves, being specific to that medium. And to be honest, a mobile phone in Japan is very different from a mobile phone in Spain. So what does it mean? It means that, and this is hard work for us, we have to give complex answer to complex questions. So the idea of giving simple answer to complex questions, that is also part of the digital world, is not in some way allowed to us, because given that we started broad, we have to keep that kind of broadness.
And the original success, the MTV revolution, was based on the readiness of record companies to invest millions of dollars in promotional videos, which they believed rightly would sell records. What I want to ask you is that still true? In a world where you have peer-to-peer recommendation, you have kids, choosing their tastes in pop by reference to one another rather than by what's coming through the MTV screen. is actually that the sustainable future of record sales?
To be honest, that has already changed in a sense that that was exactly our main engine till the late 90s. Then what has been happening is that the music consumption has become very personal. So the iPod arrives when the situation was already ready to accept that, because people were already asking for their own playlist. And so we have a different equilibrium between music and non-music inside our channels. We are investing more in music in the non-linear service that we have, because that's the place in which we can still apply our music knowledge. That is something that hasn't been substituted yet by someone else, in a sense that you can find many places in which you can grab videos, but people are still trying to understand which are the videos that should be listened, or the music that should be listened to. And in that case, obviously, the first source is still France, like it was France 10 years ago. But the second is still our channels. Consider that being distributed so widely, more than 500 million households around the world, that obviously is also a matter of visibility, of presence around the world. So let's say that this has been changing, and it will continue changing, honestly, in a sense that the personal use of music will remain. What is going to be our reaction to that is to invest more on our capacity to be relevant on music choices. So a consequence of the fragmented world is that if you want to survive, you have to escape to become a commodity. So either we become more and more meaningful, and this is why we are investing so much in the relationship, or there is no space, because if I can identify two challenges that we have that are quite difficult to answer, one is the kind of functional use that is not dominating, but is one big expression of digital use. So that people tend to have a functional relationship with something, so a good research engine, a good social networking tool, a good something else. In some cases, they involve emotions. It was very nice, the Stardust presentation, I think. That is part of the pop culture, the modern pop culture. In some other cases, they don't involve emotions, more a functional things. And that's something that is one element that combined with the other one, that is the consequence of the speed of life that young people have, that came out several times in these days. That is connected to the multitasking. It's taking us to something that we call internally horizontal knowledge. I think it was rightly expressed by Salman Rushdie today, saying he called it the careless thinking, instead of the careful thinking. Let's call it, no, I would prefer, but surely the horizontal knowledge, so the fact that you can in some way have a touch of many content, but not go in deeper. If you combine these two things together, you understand a brand like ours are going to have a hard battle trying to keep the immaterial part of the relationship. Because the relationship is done through physical things, but also through emotional things. And that's something that we are working on to be sure that we can keep it.
Final question, what are the lessons of Southern Europe for the rest of the world? What are you specifically finding out there, as opposed to in other markets?
We are finding that if you want to be successful in the long term, you have to invest in an open and honest relationship. And if you want to have the relationship broad, then the kind of attitude that you have to have towards your viewers/users has to be kind of with a perspective. Try to be more specific. We think that in the new world, everyone will have his own role. It's going to be a much more crowded world. So Google has declared that it's going to organize the information around the world. We want to be part of the creation of the young people culture. To be able to do that, obviously, we need to understand, to work also on the differences between, for example, accessing information and creating culture, or creating knowledge. I don't know you, but I found very interesting two elements that, to me, were very connected, and giving answer also to what I'm saying. Gordon Brown started the conference saying that, I try to simplify, say many more things, but saying that in some way we love the open society, and we and TV, being placed in so many places, are living globalization also in a more kind of tangible way, because we have people in many places. So he was saying we need to proceed with that. And he said we have to do it, so we have to say to the other people, free trade, don't claim. But I think if you want to enter into a new world, I think a perfect answer to that was what the Queen of Jordan was saying. that is to use the actual medium to spread knowledge, in a sense that the YouTube channel that you do to try to educate people against stereotypes, to try to make a bridge. This is the difference between accessing information, this is 180 million clicks or hits that you receive, or trying to produce culture that can build up a bridge. It's complex, but we are trying to work on that because if you want to, as I said, to keep growing, and this is what we have learned on South, because in Italy we have been, it's the major country, just to let you know, outside US, so we had the chance to do this. And I think that is a path that we want to follow also in the future.
Great. Please thank Antonio. Don't go, Antonio, stay. Stay.